Hey everybody. So I did a previous video about how you can connect Grafana to LabVIEW, so that way you can create like web dashboards for viewing your LabVIEW data, data that's being acquired through LabVIEW through different instruments or data acquisition hardware. And typically, right, you're writing that data from LabVIEW to some sort of data source, and then Grafana is connecting to that data source. So that data source could be a database like InfluxDB, MySQL, SQL Server, MongoDB, something like that. It could even be like things like CSV files. But I actually wanted to show today how you can basically write data directly from LabVIEW to Grafana. So I have an example here. This is actually Grafana Cloud. But if you're going to want to do this, you'll want to go to your, and this doesn't have to just be Grafana Cloud. If you're using a locally hosted Grafana instance, the setup is exactly the same. But basically, we're going to go to the administration section and this plugins and data section. And then we're going to want to go to plugins. So we're going to be using a plugin which basically allows us to use REST API to read data into Grafana, which is pretty cool. So this plugin is going to be called Infinity. It's this one right here. So I already have it installed, but if you don't have it installed, there will just be a button here instead that says install, and it's that easy to install it. But yeah, basically what this is this allows you to basically input data through different methods. So JSON, CSV, GraphQL, UQL, SOAP, REST APIs, etc. So I can basically upload data dynamically through this. So yeah, once you've got this set up, then we just need to create a data source. So if you go back to your menu, and we can close the administration, there's this connection section. So we'll want to go there and go to data sources. So here's all of our data sources. You will want to add a new data source. And now you need to actually link it to what that data source is. So if you're connecting to a database, for example, I would be selecting the database. But in our case, we're connecting using Infinity. So we'll want to just select Infinity. Now there's a few details here on configuring this. So but first off, authentication. So depending on the REST API you're connecting to, you'll have to define what this authentication is. And if you're implementing this in LabVIEW, it's whatever you implement in LabVIEW, right? So it could be something like an API token. It could be basic authentication, like a username, password. No authorization. It's up to you what you need to connect on. For this example, I'm just going to leave it as no auth. But obviously security is important. So, at a bare minimum, you're probably going to want to do like a bearer token, and you can issue those API tokens in LabVIEW as well. You can also go here and you can define a base URL, but I'm actually going to leave this blank. The cool thing about that is that way in my dashboards, I can dynamically specify the endpoint that I want to issue a request to. I can also add custom HTTP headers if I want those to be used in all of my requests, but also you can add these headers on your dashboard specifically, which is what I'm going to do here. You can also add like query parameters. So if you're using like a GET with a whole bunch of query parameters, you can kind of define those here, but also you can configure them on the dashboard. For network, we can configure a timeout, and I'm also going to check this skip TLS verify. But yeah, you can also configure like your basically certificate details. For security, you can allow certain hosts and block certain hosts, and depending on what you want. Health check basically just issues a request to make sure that that endpoint exists. And yeah, global queries. So yeah, that's pretty much all we really need to do. And we'll just hit save and test. So we get this little message that says it's been saved. So now let's go build a dashboard. So let's add a visualization in our new dashboard. And then we just need to select our Infinity data source as our data source. And yeah, okay, let me Move this up just a little bit. Sweet. Okay, so down here at the bottom, now we can define kind of where this information is coming from. So we can specify the format. So whether this is coming in JSON, in our case this is JSON, but if you were sending this data over in some other format like XML, just specify that. So it'll accept a whole bunch of different formats, whatever you're comfortable working with. There's also a whole bunch of different parsers. I've just been using default with JSON and it's worked great. But if you were working with like UQL, you might want to try that parser. Then you need to specify a source. So in our case, we're just using a URL. And so this is going to read data from a URL. And I can specify basically the format of that data. So whether this is time series data, right? If there's like time and some metrics, etc., I'm going to leave it as table for now, but you can play with all these other ones as well. Then we can specify the method. So this can do both gets and post. In our case, we're just going to do a get. And then here is where you're actually going to enter the URL where you're getting the data from. So just to start off, I'm going to show I have this URL here, which basically just generates some random numbers. So I can input that there. And let's go. I don't have, so there you go. We see we're getting numbers into Grafana through an HTTP method. And then additionally, over here on the right, I can specify different visualizations. For example, if I want like a statistic, right? Well, I can view data like that. Or if I wanted a gauge, right? So I can customize that. I can view this data however I want, whether I want graphs, whether I want, gauges, etc. And there's a whole bunch of different visualizations. And if you're interested, there's even more you can download as plugins beyond just what ships with Grafana. So this way you can kind of get your data, right? We kind of get the trend line and we get the latest value displayed there, and I can go customize colors and et cetera, et cetera. So it's really pretty simple. Basically just need to map that URL, and it's smart enough to basically extract the value from that JSON. And we can have complex JSON in there, and it can basically dig through it. Pretty simple. So now in LabVIEW, how could we send this data from LabVIEW to Grafana, instead of just using like this random number API? So it's actually the exact same format. I'm going to be using web services in LabVIEW. Now there are some community created tools that implement like HTTP server functions, for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to show basically native LabVIEW web services. If you're interested in those other tools, you can use those. They will work just the same. So basically under my computer, we just need to go to new and select web service. And we can specify the name of our web service. We can call it whatever we want. That will be part of the URL though. So whatever you're calling it is going to be built into the URL. Next, we just need to define web resources. So we can select a new VI, and it automatically marks this as a get. Sweet. So for this simple example, I'm just going to generate a random number. I'm actually going to generate a bunch of random numbers. So let's say 100 random numbers. And I'm going to auto-index these and build an array, and then just pass out that array. So all I need to do now is just add this array to my connector pane. So I'm going to add that there, and that's it. So LabVIEW automatically is going to take whatever's on the connector pane and basically flatten it all to JSON and send it. And that's kind of the default. So if I go look at my kind of web service properties, this will take just a sec. Sweet. So Sweet. So yeah, here's our method. I haven't actually saved it yet, but you can see basically the URL mapping. I can override that if I want. It's set to be a GET, but let's look at the output type. So you can see it's using terminals, and the default is JSON. If I wanted to change that to like XML, for example, I can, but the default, it's just going to take everything in the connector pane and flatten that to a JSON object and send that over, which works great with these Grafana plugins. JSON's actually their default too, so you don't need to change anything. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. So I can, for example, go here, right click on this VI and go to show method URL. And it's taking just a sec, not sure why. Why is that not popping up? But yeah, basically you can go there, show method URL, and it's going to give you the, it might be because I don't have this saved to disk. Let me save all these. Sweet. And okay. So now let's go show method URL. Yeah, and that was the issue. I just didn't have it saved. But basically it gives us the URL we need to connect to it based off different ways we could be hosting this web service. So if we're using like local debugging, it's going to be on port 8001. If we're going to be on the application web server, it's 8080. And if we're on NI web server, it will be 80, unless you've configured this to run on a different port, but it'll show that. And then this 127.0.0.1 is basically local. That just means local host. So if you're connecting from a different computer, if your Grafana server is running somewhere different, you'll just want to update this to be either the IP address or the DNS name of the computer where your LabVIEW web service is running. But other than that, that's basically it. You can basically take that, go, there's actually a copy URL button, and that's what you're going to be inputting into your URL here. So instead of that, we would just be putting something like that. And it's automatically going to parse your JSON and get the data out for you. Super easy. So all you need to do is go to your web service, either start it on the NI web server or go to application web server. You can start debug server, or you can publish. Now, I'm not going to demo this just because the way I actually have things set up, it's not going to allow Grafana Cloud to query my local machine. But if I had a local instance, right, that's all I need to do. And then I can basically write data right from LabVIEW to Grafana. So in this case, right, we're generating a random number. But I could have all sorts of things, right? I could have a global variable that's being used to write this data. I could have some sort of DVR. I could be reading data, all sorts of different ways from my LabVIEW application, and then basically just, whatever data I'm reading. And it doesn't have to be double floating points either. It could be strings. It could be Booleans. It could be anything, right? And whatever I wire to the terminals here is going to get flattened to JSON and then written to Grafana. And then I can create from there whatever visualizations I want to be able to see that data in the way that I want. So yeah, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And you can customize it to work how you want. And like I said, it also works great to just have LabVIEW dump that data to like a database or something and have Grafana read from the database. That works great as well. But if you're wanting to kind of forego the database, either you don't have the infrastructure to run one, or maybe you just want to view like latest tags and you don't necessarily need a whole database for that, this works great, right? If I just want to say, hey, the temperature of this, product under test is 152 degrees, and every so often Grafana will just reissue that request, and so you'll keep getting like an updated temperature every so often. So yeah, that's really all you need to do to set up a basically a way for LabVIEW to write data directly to Grafana using HTTP methods. So yeah, thanks for watching.
Canon Controls is your gateway to mastering LabVIEW. Dive into programming for data acquisition, industrial communications, and manufacturing automation. Explore how to enhance your projects with cybersecurity best practices. Join the journey to elevate your skills and secure your systems with every episode.